How to use auto collision in PractiCAD. PractiCAD gives us the ability to flag the drawing with collision marks anywhere two entities that we choose are touching. There are two main ways of activating an auto collision automatic. We can go into the automatic panel on the PractiCAD ribbon and choose the auto collision icon, or we could design a one-touch click automatic as we have here, and then it could reside in one of your bins. In this tutorial, we're going to go over all the different options we have in the auto collision icon. First, what we're going to do is select a group of entities, and then we're going to go into the auto collision icon. Here we can see all the different options that PractiCAD offers currently for collision checking in the collision checking field. We're going to go over these options one at a time in the following tutorials. The first option we're going to have in the collision checking field is the option to choose the value of mark size. PractiCAD is going to put collision marks on the drawing wherever two entities are colliding, and the size of these collision marks is dictated by the value of mark size. Currently, you can see that mark size is set at 20. That means if we press OK and run this auto collision automatic, that the collision mark we get, if measured in plan view from end to end, will be 20 inches long. Therefore, if we'd like this collision mark to be smaller, all we need to do is go into the auto collision icon and then simply change the value of mark size to whatever number we'd like. The second option we have for collision checking is the option to show marks before appending. When this is checked, essentially what it does is PractiCAD will open up the partial view feature and show us the collision in that window before choosing whether or not to place a collision mark on the actual drawing itself. And there are separate tutorials on how to use the partial view. You'll notice that when you check show marks before appending, PractiCAD opens up the option to append marks to the drawing. If this is checked, after we exit out of partial view, it will add the collision mark to the drawing. If this is unchecked, PractiCAD will show us the collision in partial view, but it will not add the mark to the drawing. What we're going to do currently is we're going to leave them both checked, and we're going to run the automatic by pressing OK. When we do that, you can see that PractiCAD has opened up the partial view feature. Here we can see the collision mark in this view. We can also get the parameters of the collision in terms of what we need to do to avoid this. Once we've done looking at the collision inside the partial view, we can simply exit out of partial view, and then we're going to be back in our drawing space. And if we chose to append marks to drawing, PractiCAD will place the collision mark here as you can see it. If we chose not to append the mark to the drawing, when we finally got back to this view, this collision mark would not be here. We will only see it in the partial view. Currently, we said append marks to drawing. So this collision mark is going to be here until we either move something to avoid the collision or physically delete it off the drawing. The clear collision layer before checking option allows us to choose whether or not the collision marks we're going to generate from running this one-time automatic will be added to other collision marks on the drawing or appended, or whether or not the collision marks we generate in this automatic are going to replace the ones on the drawing. For example, if we scroll down here, you can see that we've got two actual collisions. One of them has already been marked with a collision mark. Now, if we run an automatic and we say, don't clear collision layer before checking, which means this box is not checked, and we go to run an automatic here, PractiCAD is going to leave this collision mark on the drawing. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to highlight this entity here. We're going to click on the auto collision icon. We're going to leave it as clear collision layer before checking, and we're going to press OK. We didn't check it. Notice that it added this collision mark to the one that's already on the drawing. Now, if we run the exact same thing, we highlight here, we come into the auto collision icon. This time we check clear collision layer. Now when we go to press OK, it gets rid of the one that was on the drawing and it replaces with the one generated by the new automatic. So we can choose to either replace or append our collision marks on the drawing with this option. The next options we have to decide is how PractiCAD is going to ask us to choose the entities we want the collision detect against. You will notice right here that we have an option for first selection set. And we get a drop-down menu that says interactive selection, duct line all, duct line from to, line forward and backwards, all drawing, and current selection. These are the identical selection scenarios we have in the auto selection automatics. Please make sure you've watched the tutorials on auto selection, selection tab full, if you do not understand exactly what all these selection criteria do. What we've got currently on our drawing is we've already highlighted, as you can see here, duct and steel. So we're going to say when we run this automatic that the first selection set is going to be chosen by current selection. And that means whatever is highlighted on the drawing at this time. However, if we said the first selection set is going to be chosen by duct line forward, when we press OK, PractiCAD in the command line is going to ask us to select a duct line forward as our first selection set. Then after that, it's going to ask us, what do we want as our second selection set? How do we want to choose it? Now in this particular case, you can see on the screen, it's broken into two choices. And we're going to go over them one at a time. The first choice is the second selection set, and it's got PractiCAD in parentheses. This means after we've chosen our entities for the first selection set, what do we want to collide against and check? PractiCAD entities or AutoCAD entities. Notice currently if we check AutoCAD entities, these choices here will open up. So we can choose whether or not we'd like to just collision detect against PractiCAD entities, or we can come down here and collide against AutoCAD entities like lines, polylines, 3D solids, and polyface mesh lines, which are also known as Revit lines currently. What we're going to do for the first part is focus on choosing the second selection set. And what we're going to do here is we're just going to switch it to interactive. This way we can watch the difference between the first selection and the second selection. Now right now, every single box in this collision grid happens to be checked. And we're going to go over this matrix in a minute. But right now what we're going to do is just note that first selection set, current selection, second selection set for PractiCAD, interactive. If we press OK, you can see that it's asking in the command line to select an object. Notice that it let go of the duct. The reason why is we chose the first selection set based on whatever was currently selected. So that's already been chosen. What PractiCAD's asking us for here is the second selection set. And it's looking for us to pick one or multiple PractiCAD objects. And what we're going to do is just click on the beam, and then we're going to hit enter. And when we do that, PractiCAD checks the first selection set, which is all the entities highlighted, against the second one. And then the collision automatic is run, and we have our collision mark on the drawing. Once we've chosen how we'd like to choose our first selection set and second selection set, now we can choose what type of collisions we'd like to see. Here we have a list of all of the entities in the software going one way, and then we have another one coming down the screen the other way. You'll notice that if we trace fitting to fitting, they meet right here where the cursor is. If we trace steel to fitting, they meet right where the cursor is. Each one of these checkboxes, when checked, means that when we run this automatic, we want to see marked on the drawing any place where a fitting is colliding with a fitting. Currently on the drawing, we have added another collision. There are two collisions. We have duct colliding with steel, collision number 1, and we have duct colliding with duct, collision number 2. So we can say when we run this automatic that we don't want to see any collisions just where fittings are colliding with fittings. In that particular case, we could uncheck all of the different types of collisions, and you can see here by checking these boxes or unchecking them, it's changing all of the check boxes below it. We can check all the ones we'd like to see or uncheck the ones we don't want to see. For example, in this tutorial, we're going to say, show us fittings against fittings. But let's uncheck steel against fittings. And now let's run the automatic. When we do that, you can see that PractiCAD's only showing us one collision where fittings are attaching to fittings, not where the steel and duct are colliding, because we do not have that type of collision checked. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go back into auto collision, and this time we're going to check, let's see steel colliding with fittings. We're now going to press OK. PractiCAD is going to show us that collision mark during that collision as well. So we can choose what types of collisions we'd like to see. Once we've specified what types of collisions we'd like to see, now we need to tell PractiCAD how we'd like to view those collisions. For example, here we've got fittings colliding with fittings. We're going to click on By Layer. When we do that, you'll notice that up here, PractiCAD opens the option for color and tolerance. We can say that when fittings collide with fittings, we want to see, and we're going to click on this dialog box, those collisions marked in blue, and we're going to press OK. However, when we have steel colliding with fittings, we want to see those collisions marked in green. So here what we're going to do is check green. We're going to press OK. Now when we go to run the automatic, PractiCAD is going to show steel against duct collisions in green and duct against duct collisions in blue. After we have chosen a color to represent the type of collision we have on the drawing, we now need to choose a tolerance. Here we're working on fittings colliding with fittings. Here we've clicked on this particular field. You can see up here we got the color blue and tolerance 0. Zero tolerance means that PractiCAD does not put a collision mark on the drawing unless there is 0 inches or less space between the two objects. In other words, in this particular case, the objects have to be colliding in order for us to mark it with a collision mark. However, we can come over here where it says steel against fittings and say that on our drawing, we actually want to check these two entities within a tolerance of 2 inches. And what we've done is we've put 2 inches here. We're going to pretend that there's fireproofing on these beams, and we need PractiCAD to tell us when we're within 2 inches or less of steel and fittings touching one another. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to press OK with the tolerance set as 2 for the steel and fittings. And we're going to come over here and focus on this portion of the drawing. Here you can see that PractiCAD has marked it with the collision ball. You can see that the bottom of the beam is at 14 foot. You can see that the top of duct, which is marked right here, is at 14 1 inch. So these are in fact colliding. But what we're going to do now is we're going to click on this transition. And we're going to come over here where it says top change -1. And we're going to lower this duct 2 more inches and say top change is going to be -3. And we're going to hit enter. Now notice, you can see that the top of this duct is at 13 foot 11 marked on the drawing, which means it is 1 inch below the bottom of this steel. However, because our tolerance is 2 inches, we are still going to mark this as a collision. If we'd like to make this collision bolt disappear with a 2-inch tolerance, we better have the top of this duct at least 2 inches or more lower than the bottom of this beam. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here to top change where it's -3. We're going to change it to -5 so we're 3 inches away. When we do that, now we're outside our tolerance and PractiCAD removes the collision mark. This way we can control individual colors and tolerances for each type of collision within PractiCAD. Now that we've gone over how to use auto collision between PractiCAD entities, we're going to show you how to use auto collision between PractiCAD entities and AutoCAD entities. Currently on the drawing, we've added 3 AutoCAD entities. First, we have a 3D solid. Second, we have a standard AutoCAD line. This is a regular AutoCAD line. And third, we have a polyline. So polyline, regular AutoCAD line, and a 3D solid. We can also do collision detection between PractiCAD entities and polyface mesh lines or Revit lines. In this tutorial, we're just going to cover these 3. We're going to highlight all the entities, both PractiCAD and AutoCAD, and this time we're going to come into the auto collision icon on the automatics panel. We're going to click on it, but when we go to run this automatic, we're not going to choose second selection set PractiCAD. We're going to choose second selection set AutoCAD, and that means AutoCAD entities. Once we choose this option, the options we had here in this grid are no longer available to us. Here we can choose what type of collisions we'd like to see. For example, if we don't want to see the collision where PractiCAD fittings are colliding with AutoCAD lines, just uncheck it. If you'd like to see it, keep it checked. Also, we can choose colors. You'll notice here we're going to click on the field for fittings colliding with lines, and we're going to come up here to the color, and we're going to say, let's change this color to blue. Whenever fittings are colliding with AutoCAD lines, we're going to see blue. Here we're going to say when fittings are colliding with AutoCAD polylines, we'd like to see green. And last, in this tutorial, we're going to say fittings colliding with 3D solids, we'd like to see yellow. Now you'll notice that currently we do not have tolerances between PractiCAD entities and AutoCAD entities. You can only use tolerances between PractiCAD entities. However, most of the options are the same other than the tolerance field. There is one other option that we've added to this section, and that is the option to explode complex entities. This option is here so that if you get an AutoCAD drawing that has a series of lines or solids that are bonded together and you need them exploded so that PractiCAD can break them into one of these line types so that we can do collision detection, keeping explode complex entities checked for certain types of objects will allow PractiCAD to automatically explode them and then run collision detection when they're broken into one of these line types. So once we've chosen all of our selection criteria for the selection set AutoCAD, we're now going to press OK. When we do that, you can see that PractiCAD has highlighted the 3 collisions between the PractiCAD entity and the AutoCAD entities. One for the 3D solid, we have one here for the AutoCAD line, and we have one here for the AutoCAD polyline. And just like collision detection between PractiCAD entities, if in fact we do an edit, and here we're going to do top change 12, if we edit and move our duct out of the way of these lines, you will see that PractiCAD will remove those collision marks. So we can choose between PractiCAD entities or AutoCAD entities.